Hey there, teeth lovers. I want to first give a shout out to all the hygieniuses that joined my Lift for Longevity program last week during my sale. I'm super pumped for all of you who are taking action to be proactive with your health and prevent pain, injury, and have longevity. That being said, this brings me to today's episode where, every time I talk to a hygienist, I hear one of two things or both. I hear I want to have longevity in my career or prolong my career. And the second thing I hear most often is I want to prevent injury. And this is something I'm very passionate about because I have gotten injured before. So I want to share today my 3 tips to training to prevent injury. So if that sounds like you, stay tuned because I'm going to go ahead and dive right in. And if you want to take notes, go ahead. But otherwise, let's get to it. Hey there! Welcome to the Lift for Longevity podcast, where our goal is to build our strongest, healthiest body. We all deserve to feel our best, but since we only get one body, we have to make sure to protect it by moving safely and with purpose to prevent pain, injury, and surgery. I'm your host, Brianne, and I'm a fit pro turned business owner and also a girl mom. I'm obsessed with educating and empowering dental pros on how to take care of their body by training efficiently and building the right muscles to prolong their career. I know you're tired of spending time working out but still dealing with annoying aches and pains, getting rid of your pain temporarily only to have it come right back just a few hours later, or feeling like you never have any energy. You wish there was a long-term solution to get rid of your pain for good. Well, I'm here to give you real-life, actionable steps that you can take today to get rid of your pain, say goodbye to quick fixes, and have energy to live a life that you love. So if you're ready to get stronger, enjoy your life outside the operatory, and have longevity in your career, grab yourself a high-protein snack and let's get to it. All right. So if you are in dentistry, chances you are, that's why you're listening to this podcast. But long story short, you have some degree of maybe not pain, but you might have tightness, tension, you might have limited flexibility or range of motion, right? And all these things down the road eventually contribute to injuries. So I'm going to talk more about that later, but I first want to tell you a story about myself and why I'm so passionate about injury prevention is because if you've been following me, whether you have or haven't, I am not a hygienist. I have been in fitness for over 11 years now. And just like hygienists need CEs, we as trainers also evolve and grow, and we continue to get our certifications every few years and different things. And long story short, I've been, full blown learning everything I can about the body. I grew up with a twin brother, and so I joke that I got too much testosterone in the womb because I've just always been super active and an athlete, and hence probably why I do what I do today. But long story short is when I started working in the gym, I was very small frame, probably 120 pounds. I'm 5'7", so I was always very tiny. I didn't have a lot of muscle, and I just started lifting, right? Like I was lifting heavy all the time, doing your bro split, right? I would do quads one day, I would do glutes and hamstrings one day, back day, chest day, all the things, right? And if you see bodybuilders, that's how they train, but they're not actually functional, right? And there's a reason for that. So we'll talk more about that later too. But long story short, I did this for, 5 years, give or take, and constantly lifting heavy, 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 heavy. Long story short, I hurt my back. And while no pain is well received, right? I totally empathize with anybody who has pain, no matter how small or big. However, I truly believe that back pain is the absolute worst. And, I would be like, oh, I can use the rower, right? Which it won't hurt it. It would make it worse. Or oh, I can go jogging, would make it worse. And then I'm like, well, this probably won't hurt it, or this will hurt it. And then something I would do as an exercise, because I didn't really take a break, because that's what trainers do. They just keep going. But the things I thought would hurt it wouldn't, and vice versa. The things I think would not hurt it would. So it was kind of this guessing game all the time. So, of course, my injury was attributed to my muscle imbalances, right? I had very strong quads. I just wasn't training in different planes. And I talk about that in a previous episode. But what I want to talk about is what we call in corrective exercise the cumulative injury cycle. Right? This might be the reason you feel like you're on a hamster wheel when it comes to your pain. It'll go away temporarily and come back, right? So, because it's a vicious cycle. Okay, so if you're taking notes, I'm going to try and go slow. But first step in the injury cycle is going to be that tissue trauma, right? So it's like irritation, micro tears in either the muscle or the fascia itself, right? Then this leads to inflammation, right? Our body senses that tension, and that's kind of it's doing its job to try and protect us, right? The next step is actually spasms, and I'm not going to get into detail with that. However, I'm going to tell you that this leads to adhesions, right? Knots, trigger points, and this is something I hear all the time from hygienists. This is a result of those spasms. So that was 3, and then the trigger points is 4. This then leads to step 5, which is known as altered neuromuscular control, right? It's just a fancy way of saying basically your body's not working fundamentally. The muscles and joints aren't working together. They're working together suboptimally, right? Our body is trained to take the path of least resistance. And I'll give you an example of this because I see this all the time. I have a lot of people who come with me and they can't lunge, and there's a multitude of reasons. But I had a gal yesterday, she was going to lunge, and I'm like, square up your hips, point your toes straight, right? Because her body is just doing that naturally. So then when you go ahead and square up and you look at your back foot and it's straight now, it feels funny, right? It feels off because your body's been taking that path of least resistance for so long. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Then this leads to muscle imbalance, right? Because when one muscle is not working properly, it affects everything around it. So I'm going to give you an example of something that I see all the time when I'm doing screenings on hygienists. I'm going to give you the example of weak glutes. So I hear a lot of times people have tight hip flexors, right? And 99.9, I don't even want to say that, 100% of the time their glutes are weak. So this is often from, being seated for a very long time, or a lot of times just from like poor workouts. I see people all the time, they're doing group fitness and they're constantly doing knee dominant movements like squats and lunges. And most programs, they totally neglect the glute medius, which is a super crucial muscle for especially knee stability. But that being said, this is going to lead in poor posture overall, right? Our glutes stabilize our pelvis. So essentially, you're going to just have your posture standing and seated is going to be off. And it's just like reinforcing these like faulty movement patterns. And let's take the squat, for example. This is a movement pattern that I see performed wrong 100% of the time because of the imbalances that hygienists have. So, and this is, across the board. I have people who've been lifting heavy for years. I have people who've never worked out. This is really, it's just, I see it all the time. So basically the hips are so tight. So when you're squatting, your chest is falling forward. Anytime your chest falls forward, it puts so much tension on your low back. The squat is not working your low back, right? A squat's supposed to work our glutes, our quads, our core. And in addition, the lats are very, very tight. So the chest falls forward, there's limited ankle mobility. There's a lot of things going on. But basically, again, your low back takes over, your hip flexors, they have to kind of step up and work harder than they should because the glutes aren't able to do their job, right? So building your glutes is extremely important, but it's also, it affects your mobility and your stability and your strength, right? Like strong glutes look great, of course, but they're so practical. Like if you don't have strong glutes, you're not able to support your lumbar spine and your pelvis during your movements, right? And again, your low back takes a beating and your knees take a beating. I see all the time too, people's knees are wonky. They're wobbling in and out, whether it's both sides or one, because of the weak glutes. So anyhow, this is going to lead to inflammation in those other areas, right? Not necessarily your muscles, but when one muscle is not working properly, or if it's working too much, right, it's overactive. Take your hips, for example, you're going to get this inflammation in not only your muscles, like I said, but tendons, like, all your connective tissues, right? And then this leads to pain, tension, tightness, and additional muscle imbalances. So when you're working out like this, you're continuously kind of like, I think I've used this example before, but it's such a good example. And I like to explain the why behind things, and I know hygienists like to know the why. So anyhow, basically when you have like a crooked tooth, it's like every time you bite or clench or chew, it's like boom, boom, pounding on it. It's the same exact thing when you're working out with postural distortions, muscle imbalances, tension, tightness, all these things. Okay, so how do we fix this, right? Let's get to the juicy topic. Brianne's ranting too much. However, I told you I was going to give you 3 steps. I'm going to give you 4 because, ladies and gentlemen, if I can express one thing basically what I tell my new clients is my movement screen is like an FMX on a new patient, right? I need to see your body physically. I need to check all the movement patterns, see the imbalances, see the compensations, right? Like if you don't know what's wrong, how do you know what to work? I hear people all the time, these hygienists tell me, I don't know if I'm working the right muscles. Well, A, you're not certain of what exact exercises to do, which, that's my job. But B, you aren't going to know because it's like without testing, you aren't sure what's underactive and what's overactive, right? Okay, so step 1 to preventing injury is going to be reducing tension in your overactive muscles. So after you get a screening, you're gonna have your coach identify, okay, what muscles are tight and overactive. What do I need to reduce tension in? And you're gonna do this by using your foam roller, right? And I see it's so funny. I was talking to someone today, and they're like, "Oh, my chiro tells me all the time to lay on my foam roller vertically." Okay, well, that's not how you use the foam roller. Like, you could just stretch. You don't need to do that. So most people, and it's funny too, because I'm like, you have a foam roller? Yes. Do you use it? No. I hear this every day, which is fine. However, all of the clients who have been working with me now, they're like, my foam roller is my best friend. Like, it's a life changer. And because stretching's great, right? But it's just a piece of the puzzle. So A, you're going to reduce the tension in the overactive muscles using a foam roller. And I wouldn't use like one of those ones with texture on it, because that might be too much at first. But like, I'll give you an example of 2 that I always send to people that I'm chatting with on Instagram. Like, hey, I want you to foam roll your pecs and your lats. Like, it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable, but like, you're going to feel better afterward. Okay, so step 2 is then, y'all know static stretching, right? You swear by this. You do micro breaks with static stretching. This is just going to lengthen the muscle. So that way, when we go to do our corrective exercises, it's like our body is working in conjunction. Our muscles are pliable. They have mobility and range of motion, right? There's circulation. And then step 3 is strengthen, right? So this is the order that we have to follow. It's sequential. We can't just go doing exercises. I have people all the time ask me for random exercises. Like, you could do exercises all day long, but if you're not following those first 2 steps, reducing the tension in the overactive muscles and then static stretching them to lengthen them, nothing's going to change, right? And if nothing changes, nothing changes. So again, that third one is we're going to incorporate strengthening exercises for the underactive muscles so that we can build a balanced body that, moves fundamentally the way that it should. So this is something that I do in my Lift for Longevity program. This is exactly why I've developed this program. I screen all of my new clients, and even after the 12-week program, I'll screen them again. I just had a girl finish, and I screened her again, and we had to do a little bit more. We had to fix her pelvis, right? And so it's kind of this ever-evolving thing. But a lot of my clients, too, who are like really regular into working out, and their muscles are just they're not balanced, right? So basically they come to me and I'm like, look, we are going to regress to progress, right? We have to take 2 steps back to take a step forward. We have to, my friend Stephanie says, she says my program is restorative, right? I have another client say like it's a rehab program, right? Like, we have to fix these imbalances in order to avoid injury. Also, I will share, I was talking to a gal one time who she didn't have pain, and she's been practicing like 20 years, and she's like, well, I've gotten injured like twice this past year skiing. And I'm like, well, of course you have, because you have imbalances. So just because you don't have pain, again, back to that injury cycle, that tension, that tightness, trigger points, those are all indicators, right? And again, she's lucky that she doesn't have pain. But if you're training efficiently and working on your imbalances and building a strong, healthy, balanced body, you should not have injured. I mean, my back's been scot-free for, I don't know, that was 5 years. Yeah, 5 years. I feel the best I've ever felt, in my 40s, and then hopefully in my 50s and my 60s, because I've learned how to train to prevent injury. And this is why I want to share this with you all. So if you have any questions, I hope you guys learned from this, but feel free to shoot me a message on Instagram if you have questions. I personally respond to my DMs every single day, and I love chatting and sharing my knowledge and just helping you all feel better, because you deserve it. You hustle and you're sweet humans, and I like to do whatever I can to help you feel good in and outside the operatory. So until next week, have a great one. Thank you so much for listening in today. I hope you got a takeaway from this episode, and if you did, would you be so kind to share it with another dental pro you think would benefit from it? I know you love learning, and chances are that they do too. Also, I would love to connect with you on Instagram, so go ahead and head over to the Lift for Longevity podcast page or follow me at Built by Brianne. If you shoot me a message saying hello, I will personally respond, because I love chatting with dental pros. Before you go though, I want to let you know that I appreciate you and what you do, and I hope to chat soon. Until next time, stay strong.